So, hello then. Welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Inside Out 2. But just before I do that, I want to quickly say that I have hay fever right now, and it is affecting me quite badly. So, if I'm not on top form in this podcast today, that's why. But other than that, this should be a great and fun podcast to listen to and or watch. So, let's get into it, shall we? Inside Out 2. So, I was excited to see this film because I'm a big fan of the first Inside Out. The first time I watched it was about a year ago now, and I didn't think it would be anything special, but I was really taken aback by how emotionally engaged I was with that film and how much fun I had with it. It was top tier Pixar in my opinion, and I hadn't seen the movie for a good couple of months, quite a few months since I first saw it. And I thought I'd better check it out again. I better rewatch it before the release of the sequel. So that's exactly what I did yesterday. And I forgot how good the film was. I was sitting there laughing, grinning from ear to ear, and also feeling very sad in a lot of moments. It did this really great balancing act of being very emotional and also very entertaining and very funny at the same time. I think the first Inside Out is absolutely brilliant, and I was a little surprised it's taken this long for them to make a sequel to the film, because the first film came out in 2015 and we're now in 2024. It's been 9 years since the release of the first film, and I know there's been some shorts in between the release of the first film and this film, but it's not the same thing, is it? And I was quite surprised it's taken so long for us to get a sequel to Inside Out. But then again, look how long it took for them to make a sequel to Incredibles. So it's not actually that much of a surprise when you think about it, when you think about the way Pixar makes their sequels. And anyway, I was really excited to see this movie because I thought the trailers looked absolutely wonderful. It looked like classic Pixar. I love the idea of bringing in new emotions, and the idea of anxiety being one of the main characters in this new film. And I thought it was going to be another fantastic Pixar movie, because yes, we have had a couple of Pixar movies that haven't hit the same way we want them to in the past couple of years. Although I did enjoy Elemental. I didn't enjoy Lightyear, but I did enjoy Elemental. So, and that was one of the more recent ones. So yeah, we haven't had the same, I'm trying to get to here. We haven't had the same magic from Pixar we've perhaps had in the past from them over the past couple of years, but this looked like it was going to be return to that magic, and I was really looking forward to seeing it. And that's exactly why I went to go watch the film earlier today. And the Google plot synopsis for Inside Out 2 goes as follows: joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust, the emotions we met in the first film, have been running a successful operation by all accounts. However, when anxiety shows up, they aren't sure how to feel. And that's a Google plot synopsis of the movie, although I should also say that anxiety isn't the only new emotion you get in this film. You also get envy, embarrassment, and ennui, which is boredom. And anyway, that's the point of the movie. There's new emotions, and things start to go wrong when Riley has new emotions going on inside of her. And honestly, I thought this film was fantastic. Now, it's not as good as the first Inside Out, as expected. It didn't give me the same emotional punch as the first Inside Out did. And I was hoping it was going to give me a similar emotional punch. And it still did give me an emotional punch. I still came out of the film going, yep, you know what, it hit me in the feels in the way I wanted it to, but it just didn't hit me in the feels that, the same way that the first Inside Out did. And also, I don't think it was as well written as the first Inside Out. It's still a well written film. I'm not saying it's badly written at all, but the first Inside Out is so tight and it's so eloquent, and it's storytelling, and it's clever, it's funny, and it's sharp. And this film isn't quite as funny. Some of the jokes did fall flat for me, and it isn't quite as sharp as I was hoping it was going to be, and it isn't quite as clever as I was hoping it was going to be. And I do think the writing wasn't quite to the standard of the first film, and there were some inconsistencies with the first film as well, because at one point early in the movie we see a flashback to Riley, the protagonist of the movie, who, you know, we see the emotions going on inside her head throughout both of the Inside Out movies. We see her making friends in a flashback scene. And it's like, is that a flashback to the first movie, though? Because we didn't see that happen in the first movie. And in the first movie, we see her move to a new school. But here, it felt like it was a flashback to the first movie. But the flashback to the first movie, but the flashback scene didn't actually happen in the first movie, if you're following me. So yeah, there were a couple of inconsistencies here and there with the first film. And I did feel there were some missed opportunities along the way. But if they make a third Inside Out movie, which I think they're going to do, I'm not saying this film sets up a third Inside Out movie, but there's plenty of space to go with the story. And if they make a third Inside Out movie, then those missed opportunities can become non-missed opportunities anymore. If you follow me, you know what I mean? They can be done well, and I think there is space for a third Inside Out movie to be made because of a couple of missed opportunities to do with other emotions you experience when you become a teenager that weren't explored in this movie, or weren't explored as much as I want them to be. That all being said, I had a smile on my face from the reintroduction to the emotions we met in the first movie at the start of this film. I had a smile on my face from pretty much a minute into the movie, and that smile didn't go away. I had such an enjoyable time watching this film, and I really loved how the emotions we met in the first Inside Out were beautifully developed in this film. It all felt like a natural continuation from the first movie, because the first movie is its own story. It didn't need a sequel, and I was a bit wary going into this film, like, is this gonna be needed? Is it gonna feel, you know, necessary like I can't speak, like Lightyear did? But it didn't feel unnecessary, and the development of the emotions, joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust were all was all beautifully done in this one. I really liked how this film continued on the story from the first movie, and I really liked how anxiety was used in this film, because anxiety is essentially the antagonist of this movie, and whenever anxiety is on screen, you feel anxiety. This film at times is hard to watch, it's cringy to watch, and you are gritting your teeth. At least I was gritting my teeth in certain moments in the movie, but that's because of how relatable it was. This film got anxiety completely on the money. And going back onto what I was saying, it's hard to watch, but I'm not saying that as a criticism whatsoever, because if it had the same smoothness in terms of storytelling and the same eloquence that the first Inside Out did, I'd be sitting there thinking, why? Because Riley, as we see in this movie, is going into her teenage years, and when you become a teenager, I remember when I became a teenager, you get all of these new emotions, all these new feelings, and you don't know how to deal with it all. And this film does a good job of encapsulating those feelings, of not knowing how to deal with those new emotions that you're experiencing. And I thought that was all done so well, because it's not the same type of movie as the first film. It's a movie about how it's okay to feel anxiety. I mean, I remember discussing this when I had therapy over the past year. I stopped having therapy now, but that was one of my big things in therapy. It's okay to experience anxiety. It's okay to have these emotions sometimes, and to not quite feel like you're on the same page as everybody and constantly questioning everything you've done and said. But at the same time, you shouldn't catastrophize so much, because when you catastrophize, it can lead you to do things you're going to regret going forward. And actually, you should try and control your anxiety as best as possible, and monitor it as best as possible as well. And I do think this film did an absolutely great job of exploring that. I'm saying, yes, anxiety, everyone's got anxiety in their own way, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I really liked the way that was done. And I really liked how this was a different sort of movie than the first film. And also how it said that, you know, when you get older, you have less joy in your life. Because in the first Inside Out, Riley is a kid. She is, you know, just on the verge of becoming a teenager. And in this movie, she is a teenager. If I got that correct, I might have got that wrong there. But I think I've got that correct, actually. Yeah, in this movie, she's a teenager and she's growing older. And when you grow older, you start to have less joy in your life because you start to have more things to worry about. And this film does a really great job of exploring that, you know, joy isn't the same character she was in the first film. And that you'll have less of that joy energy that you had in the first film in this movie, because when you grow as a person, you start to have less joy in your life. It doesn't go away, it's just not there as prominently. And I think that was another thing this film did a great job at exploring. And also, it's a great kids movie. I hate that phrase, kids film, because I don't think films are designed for kids. I think the best kids movies are family movies. And you know what? This is a great family film, because I can imagine families going to watch this, going to experience this at the cinema, or going to watch this on Disney Plus when it comes onto Disney Plus by the end of the year. I'm gonna guess that I bet it comes on Disney Plus by Christmas. I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. Around Christmas this year, you'll get this film on Disney Plus. And by the time it comes onto Disney Plus, I can see families sitting down, watching this movie, and each member of the family getting something out of it. And those are the best kinds of kids movies, quote unquote kids films, because there's something there to appeal to the whole family. I can imagine people my age or people older than me watching this film and going, oh, I remember feeling like that when I was growing up and I was a teenager. I remember having moments like that where I start to catastrophize everything and I start to overthink everything. I remember having moments like that, and I think this film does such a good job at appealing to all the family. And that is why I think this is the best Pixar movie since Incredibles 2, which came out in 2018. And I like a lot of Pixar movies which came out since 2018. I really enjoyed Toy Story 4, which came out in 2019. I enjoyed Onward, which came out in 2020. I enjoyed Elemental, which I think came out last year, if I'm not mistaken. I think it did come out last year. Anyway, you get the point I'm making. I've enjoyed, you know, a good few Pixar movies since Incredibles 2. But this film, the reason it worked for me over those other films I've just mentioned, is because it did give me that emotional punch that I have been missing from some Pixar movies recently, and it had that classic Pixar feel. Something, again, I've been missing in Pixar films recently. I did come out of the cinema thinking the classic Pixar formula was back in this movie. And, you know, that's something which really made me smile when I was watching it. And the film is funny, and it is wildly entertaining, and it is emotionally engaging as well. And I was watching this in a cinema full of kids, full of some young kids at that, because just before the film was starting, in the trailers, I heard one of the kids crying. I was thinking, oh no, they're not going to be crying throughout the film. And luckily they weren't, because I think the film was engaging to them. So I do think this is a good film for kids to watch at the cinema as well. And I really, I'm not even going to say really liked it. I loved it. I thought it was a great follow-up, a brilliant follow-up even to the first Inside Out. You know, yes, it's not as good as the first Inside Out, but the more I think about it, and granted, it's been a couple hours since I saw it, so I've got a feeling actually in a couple more hours, you know, maybe tomorrow I'm going to like this film even more. I'm going to love this film even more. But the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more I think, yes, this was a properly good movie. I loved it. And so I'm going to say that Inside Out 2, I'm going to say that it's I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I can't quite give it higher. If I was to rate the first Inside Out, I might give that film a 10 out of 10 because of how much I really love it. But I'd give this film an 8.5 out of 10 because it did feel like that classic Pixar formula was back here. I mean, in all the right ways. And I also really love the score to this movie, which is one thing I haven't mentioned yet. The musical score, which is by, give me a second, by Andrea Datzman. They didn't do the musical score to the first Inside Out. The person who did the musical score to the first Inside Out is one of my favourite composers working today, and that is, of course, Michael Giacchino. And he didn't return to the music here, although he's done the music to many Pixar films in the past, such as the Incredibles movies, Up. He didn't, I know this isn't Pixar, but he did the music to Zootropolis as well. And, you know, he's done the music to many Disney animated movies, is the point I'm making. And there's this magical feel to whenever he does the score to a Disney animated movie. And I was a bit wary, like, oh, he's not done the score to the film, because I heard that a couple of days ago. I was like, oh, is the score going to have the same effect? It had the same effect. I thought Andrea Datzman did a great job at, you know, capturing that Michael Giacchino Disney magic in the musical score to this movie. And I really like what this film was about. I really liked that it said, yeah, you're going to feel all these emotions when you get older. You're going to feel more anxious. You're going to feel more envy towards certain people. You're going to feel boredom. You're going to feel embarrassment. You're going to feel all these new emotions that you meet in the movie. But at the same time, you can deal with them. And this film does a really great job at exploring that you shouldn't forget who you were. You know, that's another great theme explored in the movie. Yes, you may feel new things when you're getting older and when you're becoming a teenager, but you shouldn't forget the things that made you who you were before all those new emotions start coming in. You know, you shouldn't forget who you were, and I think that was beautifully explored in the emotions we met in the first film and the way they were used in this movie. I loved it. I am so happy to say that as well. Yeah, this was, without a doubt, a worthy Pixar sequel. And so, all in all, as I already said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, Inside Out 2 is an 8.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's podcast. So if you have seen Inside Out 2, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. Maybe you loved the film and you thought it was one of the best movies of the year so far, or maybe it just wasn't for you. Whatever your thoughts are on this movie, please let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As I've already said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And, well, it's that time. So, I'll see you guys again soon. But, bye for now. Bye.